And you are at the right place now. Instead of looking at the wrong places, you have found the right one. Let's get some answers. Let's move forward. And let's become the leaders that we are meant to be. Because everybody's a leader. Whether you like it or not, you're a leader. Good or bad, you're a leader. Most of us are crappy at it. Most of us suck, let's be real. And that's one of the things I want to do for you right now is lay out some ground rules. First of all, I'm going to tell you how it is. I am not going to sugarcoat it too much. I'll try to keep the four-letter words to a minimum. Beyond that, I am not going to do much more than that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you at all. Most of us suck at leadership. There's a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, because most of us suck at leadership, most of us see bad examples of leadership everywhere we go. You learn by example, so guess what you learned? You learned how to be a lousy leader. And that's the first problem. The second problem that we have to deal with is the fact that most people don't understand what leadership is. And so I'm going to lay some ground rules. What I'm going to do is these first few shows are pretty much just going to be me laying out ground rules, laying out terminology, laying out concepts for you that you can refer back to as we bring guests on the later shows and things like that. So you can say, hey, okay, now didn't he say this or that or the other or more about that or expand more about that? And of course, I can always come into your organization and speak and expand on any of these things and help you work better with your people. But beyond that, and a lot of it's in my books as well, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But at the end of the day, let's talk about this idea of making sure that we understand that there's a gap here, okay? You see very, very few great leaders, very few. There are very, very few. I can think of a handful of politicians, that's all, a small handful, that are any good at leadership at all. There are very few so-called leaders, and I call these people so-called leaders because they're in a position that everybody thinks of as a leadership position, but they are lousy at it, and so I call them so-called leaders, not real leaders. Real leaders can be anywhere. All of us, like I say, are leaders to some degree. Look, if you got a child, you've got to lead that child. If you got a niece or a nephew, you got to do that. If you are leading a Fortune 500 company, if you're a CEO there, you've got to lead that. But you're in that position, you have that responsibility. And by the way, this is the leader's gift to the world, is accepting responsibility and accountability. And so when you see people pointing the finger and saying, oh, it's their fault or their fault or their fault, and we see this in politics particularly because that's all over the news, we see it in corporations and other organizations a lot. When you see that, you know that person is not a very good leader because they are good leaders don't blame like that. Good leaders don't point the finger like that. Good leaders will tell it how it is, but they'll also accept that responsibility and accountability because that's the leader's gift to the world. So all of us need to be better leaders. And that's the purpose of the show here, is to help us all become better leaders. So here's what we want to do. We want to lay out a few ground rules. Again, the first one being, let's be real. The second one then is let's talk about all these different bits and pieces that make it happen. Because you see, everything rises or falls on the quality of the leadership. And so if the leadership is better, everything works better. If the leadership is worse, everything works worse. And the other thing is, don't kid yourself. You can't compartmentalize. This is a mistake that people make. Here's the leader I am at work, and here's the bozo I am at home, right? Or vice versa, as the case may be. That doesn't work because now we're talking about an integrity issue, and integrity is crucial because for good leadership and great leadership to work, you've got to have integrity. And integrity, look, I've got an electrical engineering degree. I did a lot of calculus, and there's two basic types. There's derivative calculus and integral calculus. Integrity is related to integral. And what that means is that you sum all the bits and pieces together to make one big whole thing. And so that's what happens when you integrate, is you sum everything together. and it makes one big piece, one big conglomerate. So integrity is crucial, and integrity is essential. We need to make sure that we understand that you cannot realistically be the goofball in one area of your life and not in the other. They're going to bleed over. So what that means is that we've got to be the good guy everywhere. We've got to be the person who is striving to do better. Now, I'm not perfect. Nobody else is perfect. I've done this for a long, long time. I've been a professional speaker for over 30 years. I've spoken at over 4,000 events. I've got over 30,000 hours worldwide on various stages in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. That does not mean I know everything, but it does mean that I've learned a few things. And I am going to impart that learning for you, because you see, wisdom is what helps you make good decisions. Wisdom is gained by making bad ones. And I've made my share of those. And so, we need to learn from that, because none of us are going to live forever. You don't live long enough to make every mistake yourself. So learn from some of my mistakes and gain the wisdom from what I have learned, because that's what I do. I haven't made all the mistakes either. And I learn from other experts all the time, every day. I develop myself, because you see, if you want to be a better leader, you want your life to work better, you've got to understand what your competition is. Your competition is you yesterday. I want to be a better leader today than I was yesterday, and I want to be a better leader tomorrow than I am today, and so on. And then the day after that, I want to be better yet, and so on and so on. That's what we want to do. So let's talk about a little bit more about this gap, okay, in leadership, because whenever you have a gap, whenever you have a problem and you analyze that gap, that's great. Now we've defined the problem, and I've talked a little bit about this problem. I think we all understand it. We see it in front of us every day. We understand at least some aspects of the problem. We can talk more about that later. But when we understand that there is a problem, then the next question is, what's the solution? Well, that's why I'm doing this podcast. This podcast is a part of that solution for you. It can't be the whole solution, because you don't learn leadership intellectually. It's learned experientially, but you gain some basic information, and then you go out and work with that in the real world and see how that works in your environment and make sure that it works for you. Now, let me tell you a little secret. If you're operating on true leadership principles, they will work for you, because they work for everybody. And this is because they're true leadership principles. Now, truth is a very interesting thing. A lot of people talk about things like my truth. My truth is a joke. It's a misnomer. It's a lie. You do not own the truth. I do not own the truth. Okay? I can have my opinion. I can have my experience. I can have my perspective. I can have my point of view, but I cannot have my truth, because truth is independent. Truth has two defining characteristics. Number one, it is independent of time. It was true yesterday, it's true today, it'll be true tomorrow. An example that I often use is the example of gravity. I'm holding a pen here in my hand. If I release that pen and let go of it, it's going to fall. It will fall directly until it encounters something. In this case, it would be the desktop. It will fall until something stops it. And it did that yesterday. It'll do it every time. It'll never float. It'll never rise. It'll never go sideways. It'll go straight down every single time. So the question is, was that true yesterday? The answer is, of course it was. Was that true 1,000 years ago? Absolutely it was. Is it true today? Certainly we can see it. Will it be true tomorrow? Absolutely. Will it be true 1,000 years from now? Absolutely. That never changes. So it's a timeless principle. So truth has this characteristic, and true principles have this characteristic of being timeless. They are independent of time. Always was, always will be. The second characteristic is they're independent of opinion. You see, gravity does not care what you think about it, not a bit. So if you step off a building, you can say, I don't believe, I don't believe, I don't believe, splat. Doesn't matter. You can not believe all the way down until until the ground makes a believer of you. If you survive, the bottom line is that it's independent of opinion. So there's no such thing as my truth. There is the truth, and it is independent of you and me, and we are subject to it. And that's just reality. And as I said before, I'm not going to lie to you. This is the truth, and this is reality. And you don't have to like it. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you like gravity. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Gravity doesn't care either. And it's not going to pay any attention to your opinion. So understand that. And we need to talk then about principles that are based in truth and principles that work. So let's start talking about the first step, which is leadership is a lifestyle. Now, here's the deal. If I want to become a better leader, I need to say I'm going to improve myself as a leader every single day. Now, I go back into, and I cover this actually in some detail in my most recent book, The Constitution of a Great Leader. But there are 3 C's. Now, I'm Cevin with a C, so I came up with 3 C's. Makes sense, right? The first one is character. These are in order of importance, by the way. Character is number 1. You cannot lead successfully without good character. And you have to improve your character. Now, nobody's character is perfect. Well, there was a guy a couple thousand years ago that probably was, but the rest of us, none of our character is perfect, okay? Your character is not perfect. But if you can improve it and make it better every single day, then you're on the right path, because that's the goal. And that's all that's expected. And that's all that's required to become a better leader and eventually a great leader, is to improve your character every single day. Character has many components. We'll talk more about some of these as we go along. So, for example, integrity, as I mentioned, is a character trait, or a portion of your character. Empathy is another one that is very critical. We have to be able to understand how things are for other people. You cannot be narcissistic and be a great leader. It doesn't work. And so we have to make sure that that's it. Now, there's another thing about leadership that's an important thing with character, and that is patience. Because you don't see instant results. Look, we are raised in a world where we are conditioned to believe that all problems can be solved in 30 minutes minus commercials. That is not the real world, folks. I'm sorry. I wish it were. It would be so great if it were, but that's not the way it works. And most things take much longer, and they can take years, they can take decades. Developing character is a lifestyle choice, because you're going to be doing it every day for the rest of your life. And that's why it is so key. Now, the second C is conduct. Now, conduct flows from character. Now, you can fake conduct for a while, but eventually it's going to show up. And this goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, where, you can fake it, say at work, but you're a butthead at home, right? And so, that's not going to be great conduct, right? We don't want that. Vice versa. Some people are the butthead at work and whatever. Maybe you work for that person. I don't know. But I've worked for them. Notice the past tense. But anyway, the bottom line to this thing is that conduct flows from the character. And so let's pick that up here in another minute or two.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, host of the Five Kingdoms radio show right here on the Tribe of Kings Information Network. Be sure and tune in weekly to hear the latest and greatest on the Tribe of Kings and also to learn all those things that you need to do to be the best that you can be.
Hello, I want to take this time to say thank you for tuning in and listening to the Tribe of Kings Information Network. My name is Jay Carlton, and I am the host of The Jay Carlton Show. On my show, I will be talking about the world of insurance, starting with what I like to call the 5 cores of insurance. This is whenever I'm sitting down with others, and these are the 5 top things that they always want to talk about. Come on in, take a listen.
Hello everyone, my name is Jay Walter, host of Rebuilding, a radio show right here on the Tribe of Kings Information Network. Be sure to tune in weekly to hear more about the Tribe of Kings and to learn how to overcome fear and rebuild your life every day as you become the man you want to be.
And so, conduct. Now, as I mentioned, you can fake it for a while. You remember, this is the second of the C's. The first one was character. That's the most important. That's number 1. And then number 2 is conduct. Now, conduct is the next step. What we want to do with our conduct is have that conduct be good conduct. Conduct that is conducive to helping others and helping things move forward. Now, your life works basically, every aspect of it is the same. You see, we tend to think that we can compartmentalize and behave one way in one place and another in another. And as I mentioned, you can fake it for a while, but it always falls apart eventually. And as a leader, what I'm looking for is something that lasts, and that will last not only for today, tomorrow, and whatever, but will even last beyond my lifetime. I want to leave a legacy of leadership. I want to leave a legacy of a better world behind me. And, in my case, what I do is I am helping people become better at their leadership skills. And that legacy then makes the world a better place because it spreads out. If you're a better leader, you can teach people to be a better leader, and your people can teach them to be a better leader, and so on and so on. And pretty soon, everybody's doing a little bit better at it. That's the goal. That's what we try to accomplish. That's what I'm about, is trying to make that happen. So but you can't do that if you're trying to fake it. And you can't do that if you're trying to compartmentalize, because it'll fall apart. The only person that you fool when you think I can be one person here, another person there, is yourself. Everybody else can see through you. There's a lot of reasons for that. The communication process is such that we're all transparent. If you had spent as much time in front of groups of people as I have, you would know that I can spot instantly if somebody's not with me. I can spot instantly if somebody is agitated. I can spot instantly if somebody is negative. I can spot instantly if somebody's engaged. I can spot instantly if somebody had this aha moment that changed their lives and their eyes just light up. I can spot those things instantly because I've done it so many times. And some people are intuitively better at that. I've had to train myself. This is not something that I had as a natural gift, but I have learned how to do that. And of course, that means if I can learn how to do that, you can learn how to do that. And the better at that you are, then the better things are going to work for you. And you also realize that you're transparent yourself. And so if I'm transparent anyway, there's no point in me trying to fool you. There's no point in me trying to lie, because you see, if I lie to you, I've got to have a perfect memory And my memory is not that good, because the next time I talk to you, I've got to make sure and incorporate and cover up about that lie. And then there's another lie now that I've got to remember. And pretty soon I've got 10,000 lies stacked on top of one another, and I can't remember. My memory's not that good. So it's a whole lot easier to just tell the truth and be done with it. Because if I do that, then every time I don't have to remember, because that's the key. And so that's true for all of us, and that's true in our conduct. So our conduct is going to eventually, and ideally flow from good character. We'll have good conduct. And in fact, that's an interesting point, because if you see a problem in your conduct, then what that's really telling you is that there's a point in your character where you got to do some work. So it's really actually a great indicator of where I need to focus some attention and fix some things. That's what each of us need to understand. I want to make sure that I'm a little bit better at that, and the next time it comes up, I don't have that same thing happen, that same negative conduct occur. So that's the second of the C's. The third C is charisma. Now, charisma is about the communication process. And I break it down into two areas. You see the words and then what I call presence. 7% of the information in the communication process is in the words. 93% is in what I call presence. Part of that is verbal. It's tone, it's pace, it's volume, it's agitation in the voice, and various other kinds of things. It's verbal, okay? Spacing, and so on. And pitch, pace, tone, spacing. And the rest of it is in body language. And body language is over 50% of the communication process. So here's the deal. In our day and age, there's an awful lot of stuff posted on Facebook. There's an awful lot of stuff on various types of social media, not just Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And there's an awful lot of stuff there. The vast majority of that stuff, emails, texts, and so on, is just the words, okay? So that's like having, $100 and saying, I'm only going to use 7 of them. Okay? And this is my dinner tonight. $7 worth. What can I do for $7? How do I feed a family of 10 with $7, right? I got 8 kids. They're all grown, but you know what I'm saying. And so we're eating ramen, guys. We're eating ramen. There it is. And that's all we get, because $7 is all I got. Okay, but I got $100. I got 100%. Why am I not using it? So here's part of the problem. And the younger generations struggle with this because of the way they were raised. But here's, even the older ones, it's so addictive. Social media can be such an addiction. We have to be careful with it. But the key is that we are now operating with only 7% of the information, with text, email, social media, and so on. And so if I want to communicate something that is very, very, very simple and very easy to communicate, text, email, social media, things like that will work for that, okay? But anything of any complexity at all, anything where it really matters, needs to be communicated at least on the phone, and ideally eyeball to eyeball, face to face, because now I've got a whole $100 worth working. I've got a whole 100% working, and I can see your 100%, and we can go back and forth and really get something accomplished here. So charisma is now learning how to utilize that 100% and that $100. And charisma, a lot of people make the mistake. They think charisma is what's all about leadership. And this is why we elect so many boneheads to elected position, is because a lot of them are very charismatic. They really are. But here's your problem. That is the least important of the 3 C's, and that is the easiest one to learn. It's the one that is most trainable. The others require a lot of work and development. Now, it doesn't mean that charisma doesn't take work. It does, but it's not as much. And it's not as crucial, and it's not as everyday, and it's not as long-lasting. So the idea is that the problem we have is charisma of the three, even though it's the least important, is the most visible. It's the one you can see. The second one is conduct, and you can see that to some degree. There's conduct behind closed doors that you can't see. But you can see that to some degree, okay? Character you can't see. And that's the most critical one. And this is the problem. People get it backwards. So why do you think we have so many lousy leaders? Because we're looking at it backwards. Hello? I mean, you want to see examples of this. Let me give you a couple of examples, okay? One of the best public speakers the world has ever seen, one of the most charismatic, people talked about it being electric in his presence, was a gentleman named Adolf Hitler. Go to YouTube and watch in Nuremberg where he's in the stadium and 1 million people are screaming at the top of their lungs and just so agitated and so excited to hear this guy speak, okay? A phenomenal charismatic individual and charismatic speaker. Totally bankrupt character and abhorrent conduct. 55 million dead because of that knucklehead, right? Okay? So think about that for a minute, okay? And hey, the people voted him in. They voted him in. They did. And you know, they did it based upon the charisma. And that's the problem. Because that's not what makes great leadership. Character makes great leadership. Charisma just helps you along the way, because if you have all three pieces going for you, if the character is great, the conduct is great, and the charisma is there, you can change the world for the better. Now, with the charisma, he changed the world for the worse. A contemporary of his, also a man of tremendous charisma, phenomenal. I wish I could use language the way this gentleman did. Guy named Winston Churchill. Talk about a wordsmith. Talk about a guy who could make the language just come alive and be magical. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay? The difference. Was his character perfect? Of course not. Nobody's is. But was his character far superior to Adolf Hitler's? No doubt about it. No question. He was out to save England, and he did it. And, you know, he obviously, as with all leaders, we work through other people, and he had all that help. But he was able to inspire them. He was able to give them the hope when bombs are falling, the hope when all the troops are pinned on the beach at Dunkirk, the hope to make it all work. You know, when they were isolated and it was them against the world practically, you know, he was able to do that because of the fact that he had good character, his conduct was working, and he had that charisma. So, you know, we got to take a look at this and make sure that in ourselves, because at the end of the day, I can change who I vote for, but I can't change them. You know, I can't make them into a better leader. I can't make them into a better person. But I can make me into a better person, and you can make you into a better person. That's what you want to do, is make yourself into a better person and a better leader. Now, this will work with your children, if that's where your leadership role is and that's the one you're concerned about. This will work with your team at work. This will work with your organization, your nonprofit, whatever it is, wherever you find yourself in this wide world of variety. But it'll work in every situation, the reason being that we understand that leadership is the key element. You see, people confuse management and leadership. In fact, they give people that really should be in a title of a leader, a title of manager, okay? There's a lot of confusion about this. I have a master's in business administration. They teach you management. Management is trainable, and because it's trainable, it can be taught intellectually, but it doesn't work that way because leadership isn't intellectual. Leadership is experiential, and leadership is felt. You don't see a good leader, you feel them. You also feel a bad one. And that's what that's about, is you can feel it. You resonate with that heart to heart, good or bad. And so that's the key, is to understand that that's felt. Well, that can't be trained intellectually. It doesn't work that way. It has to be learned experientially. And so it has to be developed day by day by day by day. It's like eating an elephant. You know how to eat an elephant, don't you? One bite at a time. And that's the key. And so I liken leadership to an elephant. And so since you are what you eat, I'm going to eat some leadership elephant today. That's the bottom line, so I can be a little bit better of a leader. And that's the idea. We want to do this every single day so that we can accomplish more and more and more as we move forward. So here's the thing. Understand that as we lay this down with common sense, because ultimately I want to reawaken common sense. There is nothing in my experience in this world that is less common than common sense. And we need a whole lot more of it, because common sense is what makes things work. And I want something that works. I want something that's effective. I want something that will work for me today, tomorrow, and into the future. I can't change yesterday, but I can learn from it. But I want something that's going to continue to work forward. And that's the idea. There's nothing new here. There's nothing new about the principles I'm talking about here and putting out here and teaching. Nothing new about these principles at all. But there is renew. We want to renew these principles in ourselves. You know, Ronald Reagan said something interesting. He talked about liberty not being inherited in the bloodstream. That it has to be relearned and regenerated with every generation. And that's absolutely the case with leadership. Each of us have to learn that and improve it every single day individually. I cannot pass that on to my children. I can give them a great example. I can give them a crappy example. But I cannot pass it on to them in the bloodstream either way. And they can choose in or out of both of those. I could be a really, really bad leader, and my kids can turn into great ones. Conversely, I can be a great leader, and my kids can turn out to be bums. But that is up to them. They get to choose. And the same is true with your coworkers. The same is true with your employees. The same is true with anybody that you work with, is that they have that choice. So Zig Ziglar used to talk about motivation. He'd say motivation is a wonderful thing. He says, but people say it doesn't last. And he says, and that's right. He says, neither does bathing. I recommend you do a little bit of both every day. And so that's the idea, is certainly bathe every day, but also the motivation every day. Motivate. The only person I can motivate is me, but it's contagious. It's viral. It is a contagious thing. If I'm excited, and if I'm visionary, and if I am charismatic, and if I am have a character that people can count on so they can trust me. You know, if I have an empathy so I can see where they're at and with their point of view and their perspective. And if I am humble enough, which means teachable, if I'm humble enough to listen to their ideas and incorporate them where they make sense, all of those things are going to make it so that people will trust me and follow me. And the more I can do that, and the better I can do that, the better everything works in my life, in every aspect of my life. This is true for me. It's true for you. I'm nobody unique or special in that sense. I'm no different than you are in that sense at all. I mean, we're all unique, but I'm not that different, and neither are you. So this is why it's all part of the common experience. We want to return to common sense. Thomas Paine, one of the leaders in the Revolution, wrote a little pamphlet called Common Sense. It was the critical linchpin to make everything happen, so that Americans started to say, hey, wait a minute. We can no longer tolerate British rule. It's just not working for us. He did that, and he made that happen. So that's the end of the day on this thing, and let's keep moving forward on this. Here's what I want you to understand, okay? Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the next episode. In the next episode, I want to talk about an idea that I'll talk about several, but I'm going to talk about one little quick idea about goals. A very wise mentor of mine one day said, taught me something that I've never forgotten. He said, set your goals in concrete, but your plans in sand. And So what we're going to be talking about is something called the law of precession. And I'll discuss that more in the next episode. And in the meantime, have a great day and lead on with truth. And I'll see you on the flip side.